Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pro Democracy Pod. Sorry for a little bit of a delay. We've been going on a lot of podcasts, but we haven't really been doing our own. So today we're going to talk about Alex's new article, which Alex has talked about a lot this week already.
Yeah, I mean, you were on RT America.
Yeah.
Both of us were on Amy's show, Amy Therese.
Yeah,
What's
that's going to
left?
be good. Stay tuned for
I'm looking
that.
forward to the backlash.
That was fun. That was a really enjoyable conversation.
And then I did. It was, and we could talk about some of the things that we talked about there too, because I really liked what she was saying about how the left. There's no like reasonable disagreement in their view. It's like either you're a white supremacist or it's misinformation. I thought that was a really good point that she made, and I'll probably make that point myself in the future. Um, in fact, I think I already have. And then I was on Frank Analysis and Facts on the Ground, and then the Convo Couch. So all that this week. And you were just on those two, or did I miss something?
I was on RT, Amy saying, and then the panel.
Oh yeah,
Um,
you were on the panel too. Yeah.
and like I've had the most, like I'm not going into any detail, but I've had a very chaotic 2 weeks. And I was very much like I was so dead, like so tired. I wasn't able to like even get home in time to do the panel. So I was like calling in from my car, and like all the comments were just like people being like complaining about me. So sorry, but not sorry. You know what? Like sometimes life happens, okay?
I love it when life happens because it puts. I had our show going in the background, so I started hearing you again. No, I love it when life happens, especially when you're getting a lot of hate on social media, because it puts things in perspective, and you're just like, yeah, well, I understand you guys all are upset about what I said, but I don't really care because I have a life going on.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. So, yeah, I can only speak of the haters and losers with great affection, as Donald Trump once said. Um, but yeah, I think that's basically the recap of the week. I went on RT to talk about Joe Rogan. Um, I don't know if you've seen much about that
Oh,
recently.
me? Yeah, no, I saw it, and I saw your interview. You were very good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's
Actually, I was just looking at a headline. Jon Stewart was saying that it was very foolish of these artists to pull off of Spotify. Jon Stewart's
yeah.
kind of an interesting guy. For a long time I considered him. I mean, when I was young, I was like 17 and I'd watch his show every night. And I really thought he was the voice of reason. I guess I was looking at his new show a little bit. I haven't watched it, but he had like some serious regime changers on. Uh,
Oh,
I think as
really?
much as he's like kind of independent, he's still very much an establishment figure with
Yeah.
decades of being embedded in that milieu. So I think that probably he's not aware of kind of everything that he's pushing through his guests. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I know like Colbert and Trevor Noah, like all those guys, like they're very regime changey. So like I don't
Yeah.
expect much from them. And I mean, even Joe Rogan, like even though I've like defended him, like he does have some like pretty silly opinions on like China, for instance.
Yeah.
And like it's like that's like I don't defend him because I agree with him on everything. I was like more just concerned that like now the White House is getting involved and telling Spotify to take this down, and like I don't know, it's just kind of funny that like of all the like terrible things out there, that it's like having these two doctors on is like the worst possible thing that could
Yeah.
happen that suddenly makes like artists like Neil Young or like now Barbara Streisand, I think, is leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. And a bunch
Like,
of people I've never heard of.
yeah, maybe like that's another thing. Like, it's just like they want to be like heard of again, but I
Right.
don't know.
Well,
My
I think what's
music's still on
interesting,
Spotify.
your show?
My music. I'm
Oh,
keeping I'm keeping my music on Spotify in support of Joe Rogan.
wise decision. Um,
Mhm.
no, I think it's interesting right now, as the kind of COVID narrative collapses and more people are realizing that, everything that we were told was a conspiracy theory, 3 to 6 months ago is now the science that we were supposed to trust. So these science is changing. Um, and as that's happening, on one hand, you have the White House going after Joe Rogan. You have YouTube, which has implemented a new kind of censorship measure. Basically, they're throttling videos from new accounts that are getting a lot of views. So there's been some live streams from the convoy in Ottawa that they told them straight out. I could find it, the actual tweet, but they told them straight out that you're a new account and you're getting a lot of views, so we're throttling you. Which is kind of, in my view, the antithesis of what YouTube was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a way for creators to make a name for themselves, and now they're throttling new creators under the guise of being new accounts with a lot of views. But really, I think it has more to do with the kind of information that they're putting out. And
Mhm.
then at the same time, I just saw, like, just before we started the show, um, there's a GoFundMe is taking money from the Ottawa convoy, money that was raised for the Ottawa convoy, and giving it to charitable foundations. Um, I don't even I didn't get a chance to look it up before, but I saw the tweet and I saw the screenshots, and they're saying, this money is not going to the people it was intended to go to. So I think that as the narrative collapsing, it's becoming really clear that they're increasing censorship. I don't
Yeah.
know what your take on that is, if you have one.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like because clearly like the role because I think like the most charitable or like the most there's like a sort of like naive view where it's like, yeah, they don't want these views to be heard and that's like for the good of others, but like I don't really think that this is about not wanting people to be heard because I think like either way like these ideas for instance are going to be conveyed. It's more to create a sense of like fatigue and like make it so that you feel disincentivized from putting out content because you're going to just have to deal with this constant shutting down. It seems
Yeah.
like more of a power play and a way, like a war of attrition, rather than a way to actually block out these ideas because you're not going to be able to like prevent people from accessing Robert Malone's ideas or
Right. People still tune into Alex Jones. It's
right.
just it was more of a coming together of the elite and the Silicon Valley giants to kind if it make kind of a virtue signal, right?
Mhm.
Saying that this isn't tolerated. But I do think that it's interesting that they are making it harder for fundraising for anti-lockdown protests, for um, questioning of the official narratives as things are getting more as it's getting more clear that what we've been told is not really science.
Mhm.
The science is not science.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's hard to because I know like a lot of like the GoFundMe. The fact that you even I'm always suspicious of platforms like GoFundMe, PayPal, anything that deals with your money online because I don't want to have to depend on these platforms to deal with that. I don't know enough about the trucker convoy. I've been seeing a lot of debates about
Yeah,
it?
we should talk about some of the nuance of that. But I do want to. Do you mind if I, Steve from Slow News Day, a friend of the show,
Mhm.
he just sent me this statement from GoFundMe. It says GoFundMe supports peaceful protests, and we believe that was the intention of the Freedom Convoy 2022 fundraiser when it was first created. We now have evidence from law enforcement that the previously peaceful demonstration has become an occupation with police reports of violence and other unlawful activity. So that's weird because I can think of a number of left-wing occupations that were able to fundraise freely through GoFundMe. I mean, you look at Standing Rock. Uh, could you imagine the backlash if they had done this with Occupy? Um, To ensure GoFundMe remains a trusted platform, we work with local authorities to ensure we have a detailed factual understanding of events taking place on the ground. Following a review of relevant facts and multiple discussions with local law enforcement and city officials, this fundraiser is now in violations of our terms of service. Organizers provided a clear distribution plan for the initial 1 million that was released earlier this week and confirmed funds would be used only for participants who travel to Ottawa to participate in a peaceful protest. Given how the situation has evolved, no further funds will be directly distributed to the Freedom Convoy organizers, and this is emboldened. We will work with organizers to send all remaining funds to credible and established charities chosen by the Freedom Convoy 2022 organizers and verified by GoFundMe. I mean, this is insane to me. This is just straight up like
They should at
limiting.
least refer to like what kind of violence has been happening. My understanding is there's a lot of noise pollution, like there's a lot of honking, and that's like,
Yeah.
and like that is legally, yes, it's a nuisance, but it's like I don't really like I think it's very hard to have any sort of protest that's not disruptive. Otherwise, it's not a protest. So I don't know what.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think just setting this standard that uh peaceful demonstrations are okay, but occupations are not okay. It's a dangerous precedent. I spent 3 weeks inside the Venezuelan embassy. Part of what the US government called an occupation. Of course, we were there at the invitation of the legal owners of that building, but the U.S. government called it an occupation. So would GoFundMe forbid us from that platform? Not that I don't believe there was any public fundraising, but it's it's a dangerous precedent in my view, regardless of how you feel about the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah, I mean, it has been like I know it has been like a nuisance to some people who just don't want anything to do with it. But again, that's just the nature of
Right.
protest, right? Like it's just like you're
Yeah, I
gonna
don't think protests are supposed to make everyone that's around it like super happy, you know?
Yeah, exactly. What's kind of been more disturbing to me as well is the fact that our prime minister doesn't want to like talk to them. Like he just kind of dismissed them as
Transphobes.
yeah, transphobes, white supremacists, just stuff like that. Um and it just is very it seems like he's not acting like a proper head of state because you can't he's almost acting like a pundit because he's just kind of dismissing um an expression of discontent that's like large enough to get to him. And even if, you're to me, if you're a head of state, you need to take like large expressions of discontent seriously, even if you don't agree with it, even if the people involved are unsavory, because at the end of the day, they're still your constituents.
Right.
Um, but honestly, I don't think he's smart enough to contend with these issues, and so he's kind of hiding behind the veil of, "Oh, yeah, I don't negotiate with, uh, whatever, racist, transphobes, whatever."
Well, anti-Semite was the first one that he listed, which is
Mm.
kind of show, well, I think that it's convenient that anti-Semitism. He had like 5 of them, right? Like 5
Did
anti
he?
things. Like
Yeah, I'm sure he
yeah,
did.
in his tweet, but anti-Semite being the first one, I just think that's hilarious. Like this
He
idea that Jews are like under threat by the trucker convoy. They're gonna ship us off to the camps.
You're gonna get like traumatized whenever you see a truck.
Yeah. Well, it's all the more excuse to like stay at home, and wear my mask on inside my own house.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, he scolded my old school once for having like a week that gave information about like Israeli apartheid. And
Yeah.
he was like, I'm so ashamed to be because he and I went to the same university.
He does a
My
lot of scolding.
my old university really produced some characters. There's him, there's Steven Pinker,
Oh boy.
Jordan
Friend of
Peterson.
Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, Jordan Peterson. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and me. So just, just a nice
I don't really know anything about Jordan Peterson because I don't follow him, right? But it's funny to me because I don't watch any right-wing content on YouTube, but YouTube is always recommending me his
I know
videos.
everybody says that all the time, actually. Even like one of my friends who's a fan of Jordan Peterson was saying like even I think it's excessive how much
Yeah.
they recommend him. But yeah, I don't know. They
Have
should
you
choose.
watched him? Is he like, because I know that you have an interest in philosophy and he's supposed to be like the greatest philosopher of this generation.
I don't
What
find him to be
do you,
doing
are you in agreement?
philosophy. I don't
Yeah.
think he's doing philosophy. I think he's doing psychology, which is like fine, but don't call it philosophy.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I thought Zizek kind of destroyed him, but
I didn't watch that. I should have watched that. There's so
yeah,
many things that I'm like, oh man, I wish I got a chance to see
don't watch
this.
it. Honestly, I didn't think it was worth watching.
Oh, really?
I was just really bored and like in a hotel room and just, looking at it, but it was not worth it, honestly. And like, I do think that he's unfairly characterized. Like, I don't disagree with that. But
That he's like not some kind of like fascist white supremacist
yeah,
or
he's definitely
whatever.
not fash. Like, he's just
Yeah.
like a conservative, which
Right.
is like, that's fine, guys. Like, those people exist.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I would say he's like in some areas fine and other I think there's like this trend right now with conservatives um like him who have not yet given up on the free market dream. And
Right.
so like they complain about like wokeness and stuff like that all the time, but then they think that it's a product
Well,
of
they don't
marketing.
realize that wokeness is dominating the so-called free market.
Yeah, exactly. So they kind of don't connect the two, and so
Right.
that's where I think his biggest flaw is. I don't think his I mean, like, a lot of people don't like his takes on gender, like, whatever, but I think for me, what I think is the most, like, embarrassing one is kinda like, okay, like, there was a tweet he had that friend of the show, River, rightfully kind of put to bed where he was saying, "Oh, the free market will like fight back against this wokeness, blah, 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 will like ruthlessly fight back." And then River quote tweeted it like LMAO with pictures from the Pride Parade with all
Yeah.
the
Right.
corporate.
Honestly, like River could make $1 billion if he just like went into marketing and became like a brand ambassador on Twitter for like anyone. Because he's so good at Twitter and he's so funny.
Yeah, I know, for real.
We'll have him back on again, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. So should we talk about this new Gates Foundation trustee?
Yeah, I mean,
What's the deal with Bill Gates? That's the question we're all asking these days.
so I guess the Gates Foundation announced a new board of trustees, and there's just 4 at the moment, but they said that they could go up to 9. And basically they're doing this in an effort to re-legitimize the organization because there was a lot of negative PR from the divorce. And 1 month after the divorce was announced, Warren Buffett, who was like the third trustee in the past, he stepped down. So for the past maybe 8 months, 9 months or so, the Gates Foundation has been led by a divorcing couple. So it was, I mean, that and then the relationship with Epstein, which a lot of people have speculated led to the divorce. And more recently, a New York Times piece that said that Gates was doing creepy behavior with Bill Gates was doing creepy behavior with women working at the Gates Foundation and all that. So it was clear that the organization needed a facelift. So what they did was they put in this quote diverse board that's really not diverse. They used that word 4 times in their press release. But the board is it's made up of technocrats like financial elites, including Strive Masiyiwa, who is a Zimbabwean in exile. I revealed him to be a U.S. intelligence asset. There's a WikiLeaks cable sent from the South African Embassy of the United States to the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and a bunch of Western governments that identifies him as strictly protect, which is used for intelligence assets or sources. And I was able through these WikiLeaks cables to paint a picture of his involvement in a plot, his leadership in a plot to overthrow the government of Zimbabwe and basically neoliberalize its economy. For people who aren't aware, Zimbabwe, I'm sorry, I've been talking about this article so much. I'm dead. For people who aren't aware, Zimbabwe had what's called land reforms after Robert Mugabe took power and took land from basically white colonialist Afrikaners who, basically ran the country. They were the ruling class of the country, and he redistributed it to Black Zimbabweans. And so that's been a big problem for the West for a long time. And they've used, they said in one of the cables that that Mugabe was trying to do with business what he did with the land. So in other words, he was trying to nationalize it. And you see this thread of nationalization throughout my story, where you have another Gates Foundation trustee, Baroness Nemat Shafiq, who claimed that her guide to development her approach to development is guided by the fact that her family was nationalized. She didn't say her family's business; she said her family itself. So you see this personal grudge against nationalization and state ownership and allocation of resources. What are your thoughts, Mila? We're both so tired. I'm so sick of talking about this article.
I know. It's kind of just been shocking to me to see the extent that Bill Gates and like his organization is involved just in everything around the world. And like we have to kind of step back and be like, who is this guy? Like where is this all coming from? It's like this, he designed a computer, great work, but now we have this involvement in everywhere. And I think what's kind of interesting is you also mentioned in the article his investment in vaccines, which I think, I mean, since we've been talking about this a little bit, something I've noticed about Bill Gates is he seems to be very invested in the pandemic continuing, and you kind of seem to see him like also anticipating more pandemics to come. And
right. Yeah,
And
not
yeah.
go ahead.
No, that's
We
yeah.
have no groove today. It's so bad. It's kind of hilarious. If any of our haters, you know how they like, there's like that group of haters on Twitter that just like watch podcasts on Rockfin to like tweak clips and make the guest or host look bad. Today is
Yeah.
probably the episode for them to do that. So open invitation to uh, those guys. um, but
Especially because we said vaccines. How dare we?
right, it set off their Google alerts or whatever. The algorithm is buzzing. So yeah, I mean Nemat Shafiq, who worked at the World Bank, the IMF, the UK Development Bank, which is like USAID for the UK, the Bank of England, all these international financial institutions and banks. She is another one I just mentioned who, you know, she said her family was nationalized. She was appointed to the Gates Foundation board, but also back in April of 2021, she was named to the steering committee of an organization called Pandemic Preparedness Partnership. And this, so PPP, which is, you know, different obviously from the US PPP, which was like what was it, CARES Act program to give money to supposedly small businesses to bail them out of the pandemic, or the pandemic lockdowns, I should say. I hate that. That's one thing I really hate, is like the idea that the pandemic is causing all these problems. So Nimat Shafiq, she at the Pandemic Preparedness Partnership, basically what they do is they advise G7 governments. Let me just find the spot in the article really quick, because it's also named the steering group. There was Gates Foundation Scientific Advisory Committee, Sir John Bell, Aurelia Nguyen, who's with COVAX, or the COVAX appointee from Gavi, which is a different organization. There's so many organizations, all funded by Bill Gates, of course, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CP CEO Richard Hatchett, which is an organization that was co-founded by the Gates Foundation. So this PPP is like made up of a bunch of different groups working to do basically reports to the G7. So one of these groups, COVAX, it's a coalition of 184 countries that basically works to send vaccines to third world countries that couldn't normally afford them. So the organizations that make up or founded COVAX, there's 4 of them, and it's many of the ones I just mentioned. It's CP, which is funded by Gates, as I just noted. The World Health Organization, which is highly funded by Gates. It's UNICEF, which is the one that actually goes to other countries and administers those vaccines. UNICEF is, of course, funded by Bill Gates. So, and Gavi's also part of it. Gavi, on its about page, says, quote, "The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a group of founding partners brought to life an elegant solution to encourage manufacturers to lower vaccine prices for the poorest countries in return for long-term, high-volume, and predictable demand from those countries." And that idea became Gavi. So that was Bill Gates's idea. It became Gavi, and that's what they push for, is creating long-term demand and predictable demand for vaccines.
And they won't waive the patents, even though
Right, and of course,
they're
right.
interested in some and like giving access to vaccines, but they wouldn't waive the patents. So that's another sort of component of
I
this as
I
well.
I was telling Misty yesterday on her podcast, on Facts on the Ground, and Jesse, I love it when people are like, "Oh my god, how awful he's not sharing the patents," and it's just like, "Oh, that's cute." Like, you're upset about that. Like, do you realize what the point of all of this is? Like, it's to sell vaccines.
Yeah,
And you
it would be self-defeating if he gave
right.
away the patent.
Right. I mean, that would defeat the whole point of his operation, which he's put, billions of dollars into. He said that at the World Economic Forum, and I think it was last year, 2021, he told a reporter that his investments in vaccines have resulted in a 20-to-1 return. So I mean, that's a huge return. Um, but another thing I want to know really quick is that the PPP itself has basically said the same thing as Gavi, or the idea that became Gavi. Uh, in its report, it suggested that G7 governments and international organizations should, quote, also consider expanding mass adult vaccination campaigns for common diseases, both to respond to very real and pressing public health needs and to create regular demand for expanded capacity. Elsewhere in that report, they were also talking about the need basically the idea is to have the vaccine manufacturers running at pandemic levels, even when there's not a pandemic. And the term they used for that was to keep warm those manufacturing facilities. So, I mean, Gates, he's really like a master of all this, in my view. I mean, it's a really brilliant operation that he's undertaken. On one hand, he's bought off the media with
Mhm.
Alan McLeod at Mint Press has a great piece on this with all his investments to mainstream media outlets, and he's got investments in the manufacturing. So he's got investments in manufacturing vaccines, investments in the narrative manufacturing, and he's got investments in the NGOs that like push governments to subsidize with public funds the manufacturing itself. So it's like a self-fulfilling cycle, right? Like it's
Yeah.
totally it works in isolate, because you have all this propaganda that fuels the manufacturing, you have the governments being pushed to do it, and then you have Gates profiting from all that. So it's not surprising that he has 20-to-1 returns. But doesn't this sound like a drug dealer to you? Like a
Yeah.
street dealer? Like, I'm gonna sell you some really cheap to get you hooked, and then you come back and we sell it at full price, you know?
Yeah. Well, like, because I kind of wonder whenever we're dealing with these kinds of people, I always kind of wonder, to what extent are they consciously planning all this stuff, and to what extent are they not? They're just
Right.
following like more short-term economic incentives. I don't know what's the case. I mean, there's disagreements about this with all kinds of figures, not just Bill Gates, but even with people speculating about Epstein. Like some people
Right.
think his operation was a lot more sophisticated, and that like it was an
Involved with
elaborate.
Mossad and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so with Gates, I kind of wonder, because it's not uncommon for rich people to get involved with philanthropy, right? But then this is
Yeah.
something that's much deeper than that. And a part of me has also wondered, why vaccines? Why is that something that he's getting into? Did he have the foresight to know that this would be the lucrative model, or is he like just wealthy enough and well connected enough to be able to jump on these opportunities as they arise?
Well, he's been doing that for a while.
Mhm.
So, where he got his information that public health was going to be a major geopolitical battleground, that's anyone's guess. But, given that they were doing, international pandemic preparedness drills prior to the pandemic, I think that it was kind of no secret that as like people, you know, um, overtake more and more of the earth, and have contact with new species that they wouldn't have had before. And as people are in closer contact with another and traveling around more, that pandemics would become more frequent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what like he had been talking about too. Like he's tweeted about this, right? Like there's going to be
Has he? Yeah.
he said this is the warm-up pandemic, as though
Yeah.
like very hopeful sounding. And he's actually not someone that I had focused on that much during this pandemic because I was very concerned. I was looking at like Zoom and Facebook, because
Right.
obviously this has been a huge gift to big tech.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something that I had brought up, multiple times, especially in the context of, Zoom school. But Bill Gates is actually also somebody that has been very involved in the sort of in the education system as well. Like,
Yeah.
hasn't he been a huge proponent of charter schools? And so it seems like this class of people, like they have their own little pet causes, but they're all involved right now in the transformation of education.
Yeah. And it
And
seems like all these kind of fronts that they've attacked the public or the state on are coming together during the pandemic. Like they're all it's like reaching a critical mass where all these divergent, whether it's public schooling or public health, they're coming together in a way that I don't think it's going to be easy to go back from this new normal, you know?
Mhm. That's the problem too, is like I think, people are becoming too accustomed to it.
Yeah.
Um, Especially, when it both with public health and with schooling and with work, more people are thinking, okay, yeah, work from home's great actually, because I don't need to like get up and move.
Right.
And people are
Well, I
moving
mean,
less.
that's the thing. The people that are on the internet, that, spend their day working from a laptop, it's very convenient for them. Who wants to go into the office to work from a computer when you can do it at your own house? But for the people that aren't of that higher class, that go to work with their toolbox and their boots on, I think it's very different.
Of course, yeah. And but I think it is making like they're not the ones making policy or influencing policy. And you have a very loud group of people who have become accustomed to working from home, who love it,
Yeah.
who are demanding. And the thing that what really upsets me is that they're not transparent about their demands. And like I see this a lot with the people who want to keep school online as well.
Yeah.
A lot of them are saying, they're scared for their safety. And I just don't like at least be honest. If you think it's more convenient, then be honest and say
Right.
that. Um, because I don't know, I just don't really think that, you see these walkouts of high school students now being like, the school is putting us in danger by having in person.
Well, I would have partook in that myself because I fucking hated going to school. I mean, I'm not gonna knock work from home. Like I left my office jobs with the hopes of being able to work from home. For me, I prefer that, but I don't think that's good for the whole of society, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
what the whole of society wants. But there's totally a dishonesty or a lack of transparency. You have these people on the left that are calling for lockdowns with the UBI, right?
Yeah.
But who gets the UBI? How much? What percentage of their income is given? What about unemployed people or people that are no longer on unemployment but are like jobless?
Mhm.
How much do they get? Nobody that the dollar figure has not come up.
Yeah.
And I think, because I think that if you were to say, oh, okay, UBI for everybody in the United States, every American citizen in the United States, well, then what about the immigrants who are not citizens that are they're maybe on work visas, or are there's other kinds of visas or the illegal the people that are not there lawfully, do they get a UBI or do they just starve? What about the grocery store clerks? How do you keep them at home? So there's been no actual coherent proposal given on that, and the reason that you don't see a dollar figure is because if you add it up, if you did the math, let's say $1,000 a week for every person, which is a pipe dream, but well, you'd get to a sum that was just totally. I mean, the Republicans are never going to accept that. So why talk about a pipe dream or advocate for lockdowns when a UBI is a pipe dream? It's like when people say, "Oh, Assad is a brutal dictator," but I don't think the U.S. should do a regime change. It's like, okay, but you're being heard on one of those points, and it's not that the U.S. shouldn't do a regime change. Like, yeah, we people hear you, ruling people hear masses saying we need another lockdown, but they don't hear the UBI part, and it's never going to happen. So I think it's really it's unfortunate that so many people are pushing that line when it's so far off. I really think that this is part of the problem with the left, where we like to lose and only know how to lose. So we focus on demands that are like totally untenable to the ruling class.
Well, I mean, this is the thing is again, like, it seems to be the demands seem to be very conveniently going in lockstep with what these people want, like what people like Bill Gates and the billionaire class wants. And I mean, I don't think they would care if there was a UBI. There's a lot of billionaire support for UBI. Elon Musk has endorsed it. Like, I think like that would be the ideal, is you just pay people, and like this is how you keep them in line and subservient. Okay, yeah, well, I'm just going to stay at home and receive paychecks from the government, have all the, working class people bring me my food. People feel like a hero for staying at home and ordering food.
I know, it's incredible.
And like, meanwhile, it's actually really awful for public health. And this is something else that's very concerning, is like childhood obesity has gone up. And because people aren't moving as much. Like, you don't move when you work from home. You like, even if you don't work out regularly, like the act of like getting up and leaving your house, like you're still moving more than if you're just on your laptop at home all day. And so like the amount of sitting that people are doing, whether it's kids or adults, is actually bad for your health. It has very negative long-term health outcomes. And so it's not like like when you have people like Bill Gates who consider themselves like health advocates and stuff, these kinds of things are directly like opposed to actually like things that actually promote our health,
Right.
So I don't know. It just seems very
convenient. I just Googled this. Here's a paragraph from the Texas Tribune. Across the country, teenage girls are attempting to end their own lives at staggering rates, driving a 50% increase in girls being admitted to the hospital for suspected suicide attempts between early 2019 and 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I tweeted the other day about this double standard, and I got criticized a lot for supposedly comparing smoking and drinking with the coronavirus. But let me just pull this up, because a lot of people miss the point. So we have. I'm so slow today. I apologize.
A lot of people got mad at our panel, or like the panels that we did. And I mean, I was like, I don't really think I said many things that are controversial. Like, I was just like, I'm very concerned about mental health. And people, somehow that's very capitalist of me.
Right.
But it's not capitalist to be marching in lockstep with big tech.
Right. So in the US, 480,000 people die per year from smoking related illness, 300,000 from obesity related illness, and 95,000 from alcohol. And I made that tweet not because I was saying that coronavirus is the same as those things. Although, like, I mean, the question, I think the people who were making that criticism actually made a good point, because their view was that smoking and drinking and fast food is like a personal choice, right?
Mhm.
Whereas like COVID is spread uh supposedly spread by the unvaxxed, right?
Super
Even
spreader.
though it's not. What's that?
They're called super spreaders, apparently.
Right. So I mean that's more like eugenics. It's like blaming the victim, right? To say that these people who have been who succumbed to predatory marketing practices from big tobacco and the fast food industry, with food that's designed to make you want to eat more of it, just
Yeah.
like on a that they're, you know, they're kind of responsible for their own health issues, whereas like the people who did the right thing and got vaxxed are are the victims of the unvaxxed, but these other
Mhm.
people aren't victims. I mean, this is something that you've talked about a little bit with like prioritization of vaxxed people in healthcare, right?
Yeah, and basically, this is another thing is there's been justification instead of saying we need to increase our healthcare capacity. Canada, at least, like in BC, our Liberal government had cut ICU beds significantly. Same with Ontario. And now they're saying, okay, well, how dare you unvaxxed people clog up the ICUs? Well, like how convenient
Right.
that, after this is just the greatest way this is how to get away with austerity 101.
Yeah.
Um, and especially in Ontario, where you have this like very libertarian right kind of government that is very pro austerity, that cut ICU beds in 2018. Now they're the ones, like, they have had some of the strictest lockdowns in Canada and are justifying that with like, oh, the ICUs,
Right.
and scolding people for these things.
Well,
When Yeah.
there was a guy in Boston who he needed a heart transplant, but because of his heart problems, the risk of heart inflammation from the vaccine, doctors advised him not to get it, right? But
Mhm.
because he's not vaccinated, he was taken off the waiting list for a heart transplant. Um,
Yeah, like, that's insane.
it's absolutely insane, and it's sad to me because I feel like on one side of this debate you have especially among the journalists, people who are happy to mock the deaths of unvaccinated people who are unvaxxed and die of COVID. They're happy to mock them. You see it all the time from a specific set of blue checks, but I don't see that kind of hate from unvaccinated people. I don't see people mocking the deaths from COVID of vaccinated people. Um, I see maybe some frustration at how they're being treated, but I don't see that level of animosity or hostility. Um,
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know. I mean, I that I think, like, that's always a problem, is like people mocking deaths of their enemies or their opponents and stuff like that. And um but yeah, it's not, I don't know, it's very insensitive and weird to me.
well, I think that I mean, it's one thing to mock the death of like someone like John McCain, right? Who is like a political actor who has been responsible for many thousands of deaths himself. Um,
Um,
but I don't view the anti-vaxxers as like a as necessarily a political thing, right? I think it's also like very much a spiritual thing. Maybe there's some degree of politics to it, but I don't think they're approaching it through a political perspective, you know? I don't
Right.
know what you think about that.
I don't know. Honestly, like I don't have the strongest views on like whether or not someone should get vaccinated. Like I just kind of did it so I could go to the gym.
Yeah.
um but I mean, I just don't like I don't like scapegoating a group of people to justify austerity and to take the blame off of elected officials
Right.
and people who we're supposed to trust and put them on the ordinary citizen. So whether that is about vaccination or not, like that is a problem. Um, and it is, I think it's telling that people don't trust the scientific establishment or don't trust the political establishment and their messaging on vaccines or on these kinds of things. That to me is the more interesting or like scary part. Is that
Yeah.
is the story that this tells, which is generally very disturbing. And in Canada, I mean, I've kind of brought this up before, but like our government doesn't know or doesn't understand, and I've seen this with US politicians as well. Our government doesn't understand that they're elected to serve the people. They're not uh that you represent all
They're
the
not there to browbeat
they're not
like
there to
Trudeau.
browbeat, and it's also the case that they're not like you represent everybody, including the people who don't like you and didn't vote for you.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a problem with politicians just talking down to their constituents. Trudeau is someone who's very famous for doing that. Who's calls his own constituents bigots and white supremacists, blah, blah blah. And you know what? Some of them might be, but you're still elected to serve them. Even Aaron O'Toole, who was the leader of the Conservative Party, was calling some college students like the dumbest people you'll ever meet. In the US, you have Hillary Clinton calling people deplorables. This is very indicative of the disconnect that between like what politicians think their job is, which is they think that they're these like moral leaders that are there to bestow their morals on us top down, versus what they're actually there for, which is to again like serve the people and their needs and represent.
Did you see this tweet from Jagmeet Singh?
Which
Am I
one?
saying his name right? It
Yeah,
says he
Jagmeet.
says swastikas and Confederate flags have no place in Canada. We have a responsibility to make our community safe for everyone. It's time to ban hate symbols in Canada. Together, we can make sure hate is given no space to take hold and no air to breathe.
Yeah, he's really fixated on stuff like that. He also wanted to like ban the Proud Boys, and I'm like, most of those guys are probably feds.
Who is
But
he?
he's the
We've
leader of
talked about him on the show, but
Jagmeet. Yeah, he's the leader of the NDP, which is like our like center left party.
yeah. So like a little bit left of the Democrats or what?
Oh yeah, they're pretty left to the Democrats. They're like in Canada, the Democrats are like a little bit to the right of our Liberal Party, I would say.
Yeah.
They're more similar to our Conservative Party.
Right.
But a little bit more socially progressive, I think. Economically, they're the same.
Yeah.
So the NDP, they're called the New Democratic Party. They're kind of like the Squad. Like they're like that way of the Democrats, like they're not communist. They're explicitly anti-communist, but and they're not anti-imperialist. They're very cowardly on foreign policy issues for the most part. And the Canada Files, friends of the show, have done some good work on exposing that and exposing NDP leaders, and imperialism and stuff. But yeah, so Jagmeet, he focuses a lot on aesthetic things when it comes to hatred and stuff like that. On these like gestural things, these symbolic things. He doesn't really then he kind of cowers on other issues, especially like, with Palestine.
Right.
He's
Well, I
not.
mean, it's crazy to me that the government of Canada wants to ban, or the NDP wants to ban swastikas, and then they're at the same time supporting the the neo-Nazis in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just like, to me, look, of course, like, I'm Jewish, right? Like, there's no question that, like, I am uncomfortable seeing a swastika, right?
Mhm.
And I don't like them. It's like, it's an awful thing. On the other hand, my view is that, like, if you censor what you see as a bad idea, then that bad idea is just going to spread underground. And
Yeah.
when you do censorship like that, it also makes censorship of good ideas eventually happen, like, right in front of our faces,
Mhm.
because the government of Canada, let's say they decide that they're going to ban swastikas, um, in 2 years, was to stop them from banning a hammer and sickle, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna say, "Oh, well, there was the, Holodomor and the dual genocide, and so
Mhm.
we have to ban this hate symbol." And look, I really care, like, about like, about the hammer and sickle? No, but, like, I mean, what if there's, like, a really conservative person elected and they decide that they're gonna ban the pride flag or something like that? You just, it doesn't, it's not a good idea to uh, do that kind of sense. That's my view.
Oh, yeah, totally, and I think, a lot of people who have brought this up, like, I think Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald have talked about this a lot, where it's like a lot of people think that it's never gonna happen to them, like the
Yeah,
censorship stuff, so they think, "Okay, yeah, I can censor who I want, and it's not gonna happen to me."
right,
And I think that kinda happened with Alex Jones, right? Is like at first they came for Alex Jones, so to
right.
speak. Um, and then what happened? Now, like, they're shutting down all kinds of people's Twitter accounts and,
Well,
um
I see left wingers banned all the time, or demonetized or deranked or what have you,
yeah,
somehow censored, and a lot of these people are the same people that celebrated Alex Jones's censorship. Um,
they're not like, "How
I'm
could."
not naming names. This is one thing I have a lot of criticisms. Um, you know, Yesterday I was criticizing a specific communist party, but I don't name names. It's not important. It's important to just talk about certain kind of perspectives and tendencies and identify why they're wrong, rather than um, you know, be like this guy on Twitter that exists to sling shit at other people that are verified. You know,
I
there's
actually
enough
have no
people
idea
doing
who you're
that.
referring to, so I'm like, "Okay."
No,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that do that. They're verified. They say they're journalists, but they don't do any journalism. They just talk about other journalists or podcasters.
They talk
Um,
shit.
yeah, and there's enough of that. So I'll just talk about the what's being said that I disagree with it, why I disagree with it, without naming anyone, because it's pointless and it's only good for engagement, right?
We should pick a fight with Jagmeet Singh, just like
Well, we should have a debate. That's the
Yeah.
big thing. That's like the pinnacle of what I'm talking about, is like, debate me, bro. You know?
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be like a headline, like, "Self-hating Jew supports swastikas in Canada."
Yeah, I love swastikas in Canada. Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah.
that's it.
Well, that's the thing is, like, the NDP, like, they really focus on these, like, peripheral issues that,
Yeah.
don't really mean anything, and that's kind of the issue, and, I read Jagmeet's autobiography, and it was actually, like, very moving, and he's had a very tough life, and, like, shout out to that, whatever, I sympathize, but, the function of these parties is not really to help anybody. It's
I
all
mean,
theater.
social democrats were tough enough to deal with when they had, like, economics as their focus. Can't we go
Mm.
back to that, when the social democrats were, like, about economic issues? Like,
Yeah, give
'cause
me
now
that
it's
free
like, I
pharmacare.
arguing against this id poll dogma is awful. I hate it. Like, let's just go back to the basics.
Mhm.
That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really have we don't have much else in Canada, like I don't know. I think all the parties are not really meaningfully that different. They just have very theatrical, immaterial differences. That's kind of the,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so not a fan.
All
Anyway,
right. So, are you good for tonight? I'm good for the
I'm
night. I'm
good.
so burnt
Yeah.
out.
Sorry, guys. We had a tough week, but next week we're going to be back. We're having Alex Guntag on, who is going to be a heavy Alex show.
Yeah.
Um,
You're
uh,
gonna take over.
Yeah, it's the Takeover the Alexes. She's written a bunch. She's a public school teacher in California. Written a bunch of stuff about how the pandemic's affected education, which is something we've talked about a little bit. But you should definitely check out her articles before tuning in if you're
Yeah,
feeling
it's on tablet,
your
right?
homework. This is your homework. Yeah, it's on tablet, and like
Mila.
tablet doesn't really have that many good things. So
No, I was kind of surprised when I saw her article the other day, because
yeah.
I'm used to tablet putting out garbage. I hope she's not watching this and like, oh no, I can't do it anymore. But
No,
she's doing great work,
no,
and
she's doing good stuff. You know, sometimes I've written for outlets that like do not agree with me or stuff like that. I have articles in C4SS, and like one of their guys like said that Alex was flirting with the far right. So
oh yeah, yeah, they don't like me over there.
yeah,
um,
yeah. So it's
well, my issue is that I have all these websites that republish my articles, and so
oh,
like, so people attack me for like my bylines that aren't actually my bylines, you know.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
they're
I
like,
just
oh,
say
he's.
like, oh yeah, yeah.
Go ahead. No,
Oh,
they get mad at me about websites that republish me rather than ones that I've actually
yeah,
like
it's
written
it's
for.
well for me it's like who cares? Like I'll publish
Yeah.
with anyone. I publish with Cato. Like I whoever will put me out. I'm like, you know, I'm young. I'm making my way. Like just let me publish with
Well,
whoever I want.
what's our guest name again? For
Alex
next week?
Alex Gutentag.
Gutentag. All right, everybody, go read Alex Gutentag at Tablet Magazine. Mila's going to be very disappointed with you if you don't do your
Don't do your
homework.
homework. Yeah. If
Um,
you don't do your readings.
so join us next week. I think it's going to be Thursday or Friday.
Thursday.
For hopefully what will be a more inspired conversation.
Yeah, we'll rest up and
Maybe I'll write something new and avoid talking about it 4 times before.
I have an
we do the show
article
again.
that was supposed to come out like a million years ago, but like I said, I've had a turbulent few weeks, but I do have a COVID related article coming out.
Oh,
So.
good. I like it when you write about COVID. Okay.
Yeah, I actually don't. I hate it. I hate everyone's responses to me. They're so rude.
Just tweet it out and then just put your phone down or like uninstall Twitter. Don't suspend your account or anything. Just tweet your shit and then uninstall.
Yeah,
and
just
then come
turn
back
it
like
off.
3 days later. You know.
Yeah, everyone having like an aneurysm. I love that. Anyway,
All
yeah.
right. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. We will see you next week.